Ron Howard, one of America's favorite movie directors. And so I'm living that dream, and it's really wonderful. The red-haired kid from The Andy Griffith Show grew up and made his dream come true. He became one of Hollywood's most respected and long-lasting storytellers. So she sees Chai and maybe she just gets all emotional, and then just kind of feels all the feelings. For more than 50 years, Howard has had the reputation of being the industry's nice guy. He's known as a steady leader, someone who works well with others, and always brings out the best in the people around him. But behind that warm smile and his famously calm personality, there's another story to tell. Because even the nicest man in Hollywood has things that bother him, and times when he gets upset. Ron Howard doesn't yell and scream. He doesn't slam doors or walk away from movie sets in anger. His way of leading people is careful, thoughtful, and based on treating others with respect. He has always believed that great acting comes from actors who show up with talent, humility, and professionalism. That's exactly why certain times working with some actors tested him in ways that nobody could have expected or predicted. For Howard, these experiences weren't just hard times or challenges to get through. In his own carefully chosen words, they were educational, meaning he learned a lot from them. From his early years playing Little Opie on The Andy Griffith Show to when he directed huge blockbuster movies, Howard met actors who pushed every bit of his legendary patience to the limit. Some of them brought complete chaos and disorder into his very carefully organized and managed movie sets. Other actors confused having a big ego with being artistic and creative. A few actors simply failed to meet the standards of professionalism that he quietly but firmly demanded and expected. These weren't ordinary disagreements about creative ideas. They were deeper problems and clashes, tensions that stayed around long after the cameras stopped rolling and filming ended. These conflicts influenced Howard's decisions about who to cast in movies for many years after. And so tonight, we're going to uncover and reveal the truth behind those silent resentments and hidden feelings of anger. The behind-the-scenes conflicts and fights that show us that even Hollywood's most patient director has a breaking point, a moment when he just can't take it anymore. These are the 7 actors that Ron Howard reportedly couldn't stand and really didn't like working with. Number 1. Andy Griffith. Ron Howard. His legacy and reputation in Hollywood is defined by kindness and respect. I don't know if he ever studied acting anywhere or not, but he really built his own sense, his own way of doing things. He doesn't throw tantrums or have angry outbursts. He doesn't burn bridges or ruin relationships with people. But behind that good reputation lies a more complicated and difficult story. This story is rooted in his earliest days in the town of Mayberry, where the man who played America's favorite sheriff wasn't always so fatherly and nice once the cameras stopped rolling and filming ended. At just 6 years old, Ron Howard stepped onto the Andy Griffith Show set with wide eyes, full of excitement and eagerness. He was cast as Opie Taylor, the sheriff's young son. To millions of Americans watching TV, he was the adorable red-headed sweetheart of Mayberry that everyone loved. And to young Ron at first, Andy Griffith felt like the perfect mentor and teacher. Andy made me feel like I belonged there. Howard remembered and reflected in an interview from 1982. He never treated me like I was just a prop or an object on set. He treated me like a partner, like I was important. But as Howard grew older and more mature, he also grew more aware and started noticing things about the man behind the character he played. The wholesome warmth and kindness of Mayberry that people saw on TV often concealed and hid a far more complex reality behind the scenes. By the later seasons of the show, Griffith's mood had shifted and changed. Scripts got tighter and more controlled. Tension grew thicker in the air, and cast members started noticing his increasing irritability and bad moods. Books written about his life have since described Griffith as controlling, bossy, and quick-tempered, particularly as the burden and pressure of leading the show mounted and grew heavier. Frances Bavier, the actress who played Aunt Bee, openly and publicly disliked him and didn't hide her feelings. Don Knotts loved him as a friend, but admitted that he feared his unpredictable temper that could explode at any moment. And young Ron Howard learned to read the room carefully, figuring out Griffith's moods and navigating the set with quiet caution. being very careful about what he said and did. The breaking point and final straw came during the final seasons of the show. By then, Howard was a teenager, and he began asking more questions about his character and where the show's direction was going. Instead of getting encouragement and support, he was met with flashes and outbursts of Griffith's darker side, a reality check that shattered and destroyed the illusion of Mayberry's endlessly patient and kind sheriff. Griffith reportedly didn't appreciate or like challenges to his authority and control, even from his fictional son on the TV show. You learn early how to navigate and deal with dominant personalities, Howard reflected and looked back in an interview from 1999. This is especially true when someone can turn on charm and be nice for a take during filming, then shut it down completely and become cold between scenes. The subtext and hidden meaning was clear and obvious. After the Andy Griffith Show ended and was over, Howard and Griffith rarely spoke to each other or had conversations. They never worked together or collaborated again on any project. They seldom appeared together in public places and maintained only the most minimal and basic professional connection. When Griffith passed away and died in 2012, Howard's tribute and statement about him was brief, carefully worded, and notably restrained and held back. The experience taught Howard a lesson that would shape and influence his entire directing philosophy and beliefs about how to work. The warmth and kindness that audiences saw on screen should exist off-screen too, in real life. On his movie sets, consistency and being the same all the time mattered a lot. The kindness and respect his cast and crew felt and experienced had to be as real as the stories they were telling and filming. Number 2. Tom Sizemore. Ron Howard never rules through fear or by scaring people. His leadership is calm, deliberate, rooted in preparation and mutual respect for everyone. He's an entertainer first, you know. He was someone who did monologues and he was a singer, and he never was really a stand-up comedian per se. He was a humorist, someone who made people laugh. He believes that great performances require not just talent, but also discipline and restraint, holding yourself back when needed, which is why his encounters and times working with Sizemore, an actor of undeniable and clear ability, but with notorious volatility and wild unpredictable behavior, pushed Howard into one of his most difficult balancing acts as a director. Working with Tom Sizemore wasn't just difficult and hard. It was, in Howard's own words, a lesson in containment, trying to keep things under control. In 1996, Howard was at the helm and in charge of directing Ransom, a high-stakes thriller with all the right ingredients and elements for success. Mel Gibson and Rene Russo were leading an A-list cast of famous actors. There was strong studio backing and support, and Howard's steady, disciplined direction was guiding everything. On paper, looking at it from the outside, the production was set for success and seemed ready to do well. Then came Tom Sizemore onto the scene. Cast as one of the film's antagonists and bad guys, he was a perfect fit in theory and on paper. He was gritty, intense and commanding with a strong presence. But behind the camera, his presence was volatile, unstable, and unpredictable. By then, Sizemore's reputation preceded him, meaning people already knew about his problems before he arrived. He was unpredictable off-screen, magnetic and fascinating but unstable on it. According to industry sources and people who worked in Hollywood, he often arrived late to set, disoriented and confused, and off balance, not himself. Retakes piled up, and they had to film scenes over and over, not because he forgot his lines, but because his erratic and wild energy derailed and messed up the rhythm of entire scenes. For Howard, whose movie sets are known for calm precision and family-like cooperation where everyone works together, managing and dealing with Sizemore was like trying to contain a storm, trying to keep a hurricane under control. In a rare, candid reflection years later, being more honest than usual, Howard admitted and confessed, "There were days I had to recalibrate and completely change everything around one person's unpredictability and wild behavior. That's not how I like to work. It disrupts trust and throws off the rhythm and flow of how things should go." The breaking point and moment when things fell apart came during a pivotal and important sequence, when Sizemore's behavior grew so chaotic and out of control that Howard was forced to stop production altogether and completely halt filming. Crew members remembered and recalled the moment vividly and clearly. It wasn't an explosion of anger, but rather the quiet resolve and determination of a director who was determined to protect his set and the people on it, even if it meant pushing back against one of his most combustible and explosive performers. When Tom Sizemore passed away and died in 2023, Ron Howard offered no statement, no tribute or words of remembrance. Sometimes, even for Hollywood's nicest director, forgiveness has its limits, and there are some things you just can't forgive or forget. Number 3. Shelley Long Ron. Howard has always believed in balance and keeping things even. As a director, he thrives on collaboration and working together with others. He's an orchestrator who builds harmony first and foremost, making sure everyone works well together. And to this day, if you get him up in front of an audience, he's pretty entertaining and fun to watch. His movie sets are famous for their calm, steady focus, where actors feel safe to explore and try new things because they know their director is listening, adapting and changing when needed, and guiding with patience. But in 1982, that philosophy and belief system was tested and challenged. The project was Night Shift, Howard's first big studio film, a quirky and unusual comedy starring Henry Winkler, and a breakout performance from Michael Keaton, who was just becoming known. For the young director, who was barely in his 20s, the stakes couldn't have been higher or more important. Everything needed to run smoothly and go well. Enter Shelley Long onto the scene. At the time, she was fresh from television success and doing well on TV. She wasn't yet the household name that Cheers would make her into later. On paper, looking at her resume, she was perfect for the role. Smart, witty, and capable of mixing charm with bite and sharp humor. But almost immediately, friction and problems surfaced and appeared. Crew members later recalled and remembered her approach as overly controlling and meticulously calculated, where everything had to be exact. While Michael Keaton thrived on improvisation and making things up on the spot, energizing the set with spontaneity and surprises, Long demanded structure and insisted on precision for every single take and scene they filmed. For Howard, the contrast was stark and very noticeable. The difference was huge. Instead of the harmony he worked so hard to build and create, he found himself constantly negotiating and dealing with Long's demands, trying to balance her rigid control and strictness with the freedom his other actors needed to shine and do their best work. It was his first real test as a director, and one that left a lasting impression and memory on how he would handle strong personalities for the rest of his career and future work. Shelley Long's clashes and fights with Howard went beyond minor disagreements and small problems. She questioned blocking and where actors should stand, challenged rewrites and changes to the script, and turned nearly every scene into a debate and argument over tone and motivation for the characters. In a 2006 interview, Howard reflected diplomatically and carefully on such experiences, being polite about it. Some actors come to set with their mind made up, leaving no room for discovery and finding new things. That's difficult when you're trying to capture something magical in the moment and create something special. The breaking point and final straw came during a pivotal and important scene when Long reportedly delayed production for hours, holding everything up and demanding script changes and rewrites. Crew members recalled and remembered Howard's visible frustration that you could see on his face. He never raised his voice or yelled, but it was clear and obvious he was quietly figuring out how to work around her. Not with her, finding ways to avoid dealing with her directly. To Long, however, her approach was professionalism and doing her job the right way. In a 1995 interview, she defended herself and her actions. "I come prepared and ready to work. I always do. Some directors mistake questions for challenges and think I'm fighting them." For her, Howard's relaxed style felt unserious and unprofessional, even like he wasn't taking things seriously enough. The lesson for Ron Howard was lasting and stayed with him. He valued collaboration over control, working together instead of bossing people around. and Shelley Long embodied and represented everything he hoped to avoid on future sets. Everything he didn't want to deal with again. Number 4. Russell Crowe. Ron Howard has always been the calm center of his productions, the rock on which everything rests and depends. His movie sets are disciplined, professional, and comfortable for everyone working there. They're guided by his patience and his quiet authority and leadership. He was really the rock on which the show was built in every way and every sense, which is exactly why his collaboration and work with Russell Crowe on A Beautiful Mind left such a lasting mark and made such a big impression on him. On paper, looking at it from outside, it was a dream pairing and perfect match. Howard's steady direction combined with Crowe's electrifying presence and exciting energy seemed destined for Oscar glory and awards. And indeed, the film went on to win Best Picture, the top award. But behind the scenes, Howard faced a storm of intensity unlike anything he had managed or dealt with before. Crowe's performance as John Nash, the mathematician, remains one of his most celebrated and praised performances. Yet for Howard, the process was less about acclaim and praise, and more about navigating a mercurial genius, someone brilliant but unpredictable, whose passion and volatility tested even his legendary patience that he was famous for. Insiders and people who worked on set described Crowe arriving on set each day as if he were preparing for battle, getting ready for war, not against his fellow actors, but against the filmmaking process itself and how movies are made. He challenged rewrites and changes to the script, scrutinized and closely examined camera angles, and turned every note and suggestion from Howard into a philosophical standoff and deep argument about meaning. What should have been a smooth production often became a series of negotiations and deals that had to be worked out. Russell was brilliant and incredibly talented, one assistant director recalled and remembered. But he made everything harder than it needed to be, more difficult than necessary. Ron had to manage his fire and intense energy just to keep the film moving forward and progressing. Howard, ever professional and always keeping his cool, later admitted to The Hollywood Reporter newspaper, "With some actors, you guide the scene and help them along. With Russell, you hold on tight and hope for the best, just trying to survive it." The tension wasn't driven by ego or arrogance, but by process and how they each thought things should be done. Crowe saw Howard's collaborative approach and working together as a threat to the raw authenticity and real truthfulness he demanded and required. In 2004, he explained his method and way of working without apology or feeling sorry. "I don't show up to be liked by people. I show up to find truth in every moment. If that causes friction and problems, so be it. I don't care." When asked directly about Howard and working with him, Crowe's words felt like faint praise, like he was barely complimenting him. "Ron's a thoughtful director who thinks things through, but sometimes I think he wants everything too clean, too safe and careful. Real art isn't safe, it's dangerous and risky." The film became a triumph and huge success, winning Oscars and securing its place in cinematic history as an important movie. But for Howard, the personal toll and cost was clear and obvious. He never cast Crowe in another lead role or main part again. No cameos or small appearances, no follow-ups or future projects together. When pressed and asked in 2015 about a possible reunion and working together again, Howard's answer was firm yet diplomatic and careful. "Some collaborations are meant to be once in a lifetime, just one time." The masterpiece stood and remained a great film, but the partnership ended and was over. It was proof that even for Hollywood's nicest director, some creative costs are too high and some prices are just too much to pay again. Number 5. Marlon Brando in 1995. Ron Howard was handed what looked like the opportunity every director dreams of and wants: the chance to direct Marlon Brando. I've always felt that that's another thing that I really took away from the show, was a sense that, hey, it was, it could be a lot of fun and enjoyable. The legendary method actor, the icon and star of A Streetcar Named Desire and The Godfather, was cinema royalty, Hollywood nobility. For many directors, working with him would be a career-defining honor, the highlight of their whole career. For Howard, it became a harsh lesson in why some legends are best admired from afar, from a distance and not up close. The project, a biographical drama about an aging patriarch wrestling with family legacy and his family's history, had all the makings of awards season gold and seemed perfect for winning prizes. On paper it was prestige, fancy, and impressive. In practice and in reality, it unraveled into a nightmare and complete disaster. Insiders and people on set recalled Brando arriving on set unprepared, not ready, refusing to learn his lines and memorize his dialogue, and insisting that dialogue be written on cue cards scattered and spread across the set so he could read them. But that was only the beginning and just the start of the problems. The real issue wasn't his eccentric methods and weird ways of working. It was his disregard and lack of respect for everyone else's time and schedules. Brando would vanish and disappear for hours without explanation or telling anyone why, delay entire productions by showing up late over and over, and demand sweeping script changes on the spot, wanting things rewritten right then and there. What for other actors would have been unthinkable and never allowed became routine and normal under his presence. For Ron Howard, a director who built his reputation on steady, respectful collaboration and working well with others, the experience was suffocating and felt like he couldn't breathe. He found himself trapped in a production where one actor held the entire process hostage, taking control of everything, treating the discipline of filmmaking as if it were beneath him and not worth his respect. The result was clear and obvious. What should have been the crowning jewel and highest achievement of Howard's directing career instead became the moment he realized that even Hollywood's greatest talents can destroy a film when professionalism is left behind and respect goes out the window. Crew members remembered the chaos vividly, clearly picturing the disaster. Marlon treated the set like his own playground, one insider recalled and remembered. He'd stop mid-scene, right in the middle of filming, decide he wanted a new motivation and different reason for his character's actions, and everyone else just had to wait around. The breaking point and moment when everything fell apart came during what should have been a routine dialogue exchange, just a normal conversation scene. Brando halted filming again and again, stopping over and over, demanded rewrites on the spot, wanting changes right then vanished and disappeared for 3 hours without telling anyone. When he finally returned and came back, he announced he had completely reconceived the character, completely changed his understanding, and insisted they restart from scratch and begin all over again from the beginning. Howard, always the picture of professionalism and proper behavior, did his best to accommodate Brando's whims and strange requests while protecting the schedule and trying to keep things on track. But behind the scenes, those close to the production said his frustration boiled over, and he got really upset and angry. The disrespect toward the cast, crew, and the process itself had crossed every line and gone too far. After weeks of disorder and chaos, the project collapsed and fell apart completely. Howard never publicly blamed Brando or said it was his fault in interviews, but the truth was understood in Hollywood circles, and everyone in the industry knew what really happened. Even the industry's most patient director had found his limit and breaking point, the moment when he just couldn't take any more. Years later, when asked about working with iconic stars and legendary actors, Howard gave a measured but revealing response that showed his true feelings. Some legends earn their reputation through their work and the quality of what they create. Others earn it through their behavior and how they act. It's important to know the difference between the two. From Brando's unchecked chaos and wild disorder to Mel Gibson's overwhelming dominance and controlling behavior, from Russell Crowe's volatility and unpredictable nature to Henry Winkler's unexpected rivalry and competition, and even the complicated lessons learned under Andy Griffith. Ron Howard's career is proof and evidence that even Hollywood's nicest director has faced battles behind the camera and fought hard fights that nobody saw. Behind the image of Hollywood's nicest director lies a harder reality and tougher truth. Even the calmest, most patient leaders eventually reach their limits and find their breaking point. For Ron Howard, those limits weren't about ego or grudges, holding on to anger. They were about professionalism and doing the job right. These experiences shaped the filmmaker and made him who he is today. He became a director who prizes collaboration over chaos, working together instead of disorder, discipline over improvisation, making things up on the spot, and above all, respect for the craft and the people who bring it to life and make the magic happen. His conflicts were never about personal animosity or personal hatred. They were about protecting an environment where everyone could do their best work and shine. That was his standard and rule, and not everyone could meet it or live up to it. What do you think about all this? Were Howard's expectations too high and unreasonable, or were these actors simply crossing the line of professionalism and going too far? Share your thoughts in the comments section, and don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories of Hollywood's hidden conflicts and the true cost of perfection in the film industry. Number 6. Henry Winkler in The Warm Glow and Happy Light of 1970s television. Happy Days seemed like the perfect slice of nostalgic Americana, a perfect piece of good old American life. The entire time that I was under contract and doing Happy Days, my dream was to be a filmmaker and make movies. For audiences watching at home, it was all smiles, laughter, and friendship between characters. For Ron Howard, however, life behind the cameras told a more complicated story, and things were harder than they looked. Cast as clean-cut Richie Cunningham, Howard was supposed to be the show's anchor, the main character everyone focused on. But when Henry Winkler's Fonzie exploded into a cultural phenomenon and became hugely popular, the balance shifted and things changed. The sidekick became the star, and the spotlight that Howard once held began to dim and fade away. Industry insiders whispered and talked quietly about the tension and problems. Howard had long dreamed of becoming a filmmaker, and to him, Happy Days was a stepping stone, a way to get to his real goal. Winkler, meanwhile, embraced his breakout stardom and loved being famous, and his growing influence on the show's direction left Howard quietly sidelined and pushed aside. As one writer later put it and explained, Happy Days was sold as Richie's story and about his life, but America wanted the Fonz, and that didn't sit well with Ron and made him uncomfortable. When Happy Days premiered and first started in 1974, Ron Howard was the heart of the show, the emotional center. He was the clean-cut everyman that audiences recognized and remembered from his years as Opie Taylor, the little boy character. But it didn't take long for Henry Winkler's Arthur Fonzie Fonzarelli to steal the spotlight and take all the attention. Originally written as a supporting role and small part, the leather-jacketed rebel became a cultural phenomenon almost overnight and very quickly became hugely famous. As Fonzie's popularity skyrocketed and shot up incredibly fast, the balance of power on set shifted and changed. Scripts were rewritten to center his character and make him the focus. Promotional campaigns placed him front and center in advertising, and executives leaned into the rebel's rising fame and used him to promote the show. What began as Richie Cunningham's story gradually morphed and transformed into The Fonzie Show in all but name, even though they didn't officially change the title. Industry sources at the time noted and pointed out Howard's visible frustration that you could see on his face. He had been cast as the series anchor and main character only to find himself sidelined on his own show, pushed aside on the show he was supposed to star in. One crew member later described the situation bluntly and honestly without holding back. The irony was sharp and obvious, funny in a sad way. The wholesome hero got overshadowed by the rebel. The cool bad boy took over from the good kid. Howard himself has always spoken carefully about the subject, never lashing out or attacking anyone, but never denying the tension and problems either, not pretending everything was fine. In a reflective and thoughtful 2023 interview, he admitted and confessed, "When a character becomes that iconic and that famous, the dynamic changes and relationships shift. Adjustments have to be made, and things have to change." In one of his rare, candid remarks from the 1990s, being more honest than usual, Howard went further and said more. "There were times I questioned my place on the show and wondered where I fit in. I didn't resent Henry personally or hate him as a person, but I definitely resented how the narrative shifted around me and how the story changed to leave me behind." For Ron Howard, Happy Days wasn't just a sitcom, just a funny TV show. It was a lesson in stardom and how fame works. the hard reality that television can change course in an instant, suddenly and quickly, and even the lead actor can lose his center stage and get pushed aside. By the early 2000s, Ron Howard had built his reputation as one of Hollywood's most reliable directors, someone you could count on. He was steady, professional, and trusted to handle big productions with calm precision and careful attention. So when the opportunity came to direct Mel Gibson in Ransom, the pairing looked like a natural fit and perfect match. Two consummate professionals, both known for being good at their jobs, uniting for a high-stakes thriller and exciting action movie. But what seemed ideal on paper quickly became a test of patience and control, challenging Howard in new ways. In 1996, Gibson stood at the very top of Hollywood, at the peak of fame and success. Fresh off his double Oscar wins for Braveheart, winning two of the biggest awards, he was both a star and a celebrated director himself, wielding enormous influence and power in the industry. His intensity, so electrifying and exciting on screen, proved far more difficult to manage behind the camera during actual filming. Industry insiders recalled and remembered how Gibson demanded script revisions and changes to the story, challenged Howard's direction and questioned his choices, and often acted as though he were co-directing the film, like he was in charge too. Mel had strong opinions about everything, one crew member later revealed and shared. Camera angles, line delivery, and how actors should say things, even catering and the food that was served. Ron spent as much time navigating Mel's input and dealing with his opinions as he did directing the actual filming and making the movie itself.